Well, welcome to Staff Chat. In this series, we are interviewing staff members here at Christian Family Chapel to learn a little bit more about them and a little bit about their journey of coming to CFC. Thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here for a chat. So in this episode, I'd like to introduce you to Doug Rutt, who serves as our teaching pastor here at Christian Family Chapel.
Way to go, Tracy. Nice
Woohoo!
job.
Got the intro.
Glad to be here.
Well, usually when we're sitting here in the studio, I'm firing questions towards you from what you have just taught on.
Yes.
But today we get to ask questions about Doug.
Me. Yeah. I might be more comfortable with questions about the Bible. We'll see.
Interesting.
Yes.
Well, here we go. Well, we're going to start going backwards a little bit here. When you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
What did I want to be when I grew up?
Mm-hmm.
Grew up on a farm. Didn't want to be a farmer. Then we went to a mission field for a year in Costa Rica. Didn't want to be a missionary. Came back, was a juvenile delinquent. Didn't want to be an adult delinquent. Now that's kind of funny. I don't have any distinct memory of wanting to be a baseball player, or fireman, policeman. This might be a strange thought, but people my age will remember that there were lots of movies on the end. There's probably not lots. There weren't lots of movies because it's that long ago. But when I was a kid in the church, they were doing these movies on end times.
Oh, okay.
It's called A Thief in the Night and A Distant Thunder. And I think, this I do remember, when I would think about what do I want to do or be when I grow up, I would always think, well, I won't be around that long.
Wow, really?
Yeah, I never thought I would, as a kid, I never thought I'd go past 21 because the rapture, that was so built into our thinking that the rapture was going to take place, Jesus was going to come back, so why do you have to decide what you're going to be when you grow up? Because you're never going to grow up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what did I want to be when I grew up? I wanted to go to heaven.
I wanted to be in heaven with Jesus.
Yes. Isn't that great? I wasn't near that spiritual, but that's what I thought. Well, I was hoping I'd get to heaven, but yeah, that's probably what I thought as a kid.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. You don't recognize those movie names?
I do recognize the names, but I've never seen them.
No, it's really impacted my thoughts about how we talk about future things now, because if you went back and watched those things now, you would be like, really? That's what we thought? That was our best thoughts about housing? I mean, it was done early 70s. So people were driving around VW buses. They're hippies. They're trying to put tattoos on people's foreheads because that's their understanding, mark of the beast. And
okay.
So there was such an emphasis there, and it really was to scare you. And into
making a decision, yeah.
So dramatically different because, back then we're talking about tattoos on the forehead, and this week I'm reading about you can buy your groceries at Whole Foods by scanning your palm. So the thing about the whole mark of the beast and that sort of stuff that scared me as a kid going to look probably a lot different than they imagined in the early 70s.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yes. That's interesting that I was a kid in the early 70s, right?
Yeah. Shocking. You were a kid in the early 70s?
Yes.
Wow. Man, so I'm curious now, did that have any play for you in moving towards ministry as a kid?
No.
Okay. So that was more of a childhood experience.
I had a lot of play for scaring me big time as a kid.
I gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, I'd come home from school. Parents were divorced, so I lived with my mom, my sister, and my brother, and if they weren't there, and they were supposed to be there when I get home from school, literally, this I do remember as a kid, running around the house looking for piles of clothes, afraid that I was going to find a pile of clothes, the rapture had taken place, and I had been left behind. Those movies really marked my life, so But that had no thought about ministry then.
No bearing
for
on ministry.
Sure.
Yeah.
No.
So
No, I don't know if that question's coming about ministry.
yeah.
Okay,
So that it's funny you talk about coming home and feeling like people are gone. I had an experience like that in high school because that had been like a teaching series, and all the Left Behind series came out. And then,
the books.
Yeah, the books, and I wouldn't read them because the whole idea just scared me. I remember coming home and like the TV was snow, like the signal went out, the phones were out, no one was home, and I was like, oh.
And it might be happening to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it really scared me. It was crazy.
Yes.
So that didn't play a role in ministry, but what drove you into full-time ministry? So key points, decisions, experiences that led you down that path.
Yeah. I probably didn't think about it in terms of ministry at first, but about leading me into ministry. But when I was 15, that summer, between 9th and 10th grade year, I went to a conference at the beach called Ocean Getaway. We called it Ocean Get a Girl because it was with Youth for Christ, and I really wasn't. I had tried to walk with the Lord, really tried to be determined, but wasn't very good at it, and had kind of was like, I can't do this. My sister's good at it. I'm not, and kind of giving up on the Christian life. And then I found out about this conference at the beach, and it was going to be 100 teenagers, 70 girls, and 30 guys. And so I felt the call of God upon my life.
Based on the
to
data.
go to the beach, yes. Yeah. But at that conference, there's a guy named Bob Hobson who I remember started the first night. The Christian life isn't difficult, it's impossible. And I was like, that's the first thing I've heard in a long time that actually made sense to me.
Yeah.
Christian life is, because, I had been sincere. I had tried. I had gone to camp, thrown my stick in the fire, that I was going to be devoted and committed, and 2 weeks done. And so this guy captured me with that, and then he said, but they call it the Christian life because only Christ can live it. And the Jesus who walked the pages of this New Testament is alive and living in you, waiting to live his life through you if you will let him. And he presented the Christian life to me in a way that I had never heard the Christian life described. The Christ life, the life of Jesus in me, lived through me, and taught the scriptures in a way that I had. It's not that people didn't teach the Bible accurately. He just taught it in a way that I was like, man,
it captured you.
Yeah, I love this. And so it not only turned my spiritual journey around, probably even more impactful. Well, no, I shouldn't say more impactful. That's most impactful, that it brought, actually, for the first time in my life, endurance. That my Christian life was not as good as my determination lasted. That makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does, yeah.
Because it was dependent upon Christ and his work in me and through me. So it changed the trajectory of my spiritual journey. But I start there because I think part of what God placed in my heart through that experience was a longing, a desire to be a person that would help other churched teenagers like I had been, who had heard it, tried, failed. And I thought, if I could be used by the Lord to help church kids discover a real relationship with Jesus, that'd be awesome.
To experience what you experienced.
Yeah. To be able to tell others what I had never heard. I had always heard the first part of the gospel, Jesus died on the cross for me, but that was usually followed with, and you better live your life for him. He died for you. You better live for him. I never understood, and I shouldn't blame it on others as if they didn't say it. They probably said it. I didn't have ears to hear it, didn't have a heart to hear it, whatever. I just never heard that, and he's risen from the dead and alive and living in you through the person of the Holy Spirit. So that truth changed my life, put in my heart a desire to help others experience that. But as you know, the problem with that desire in my heart was I was scared out of my mind to talk in front of people. And not just scared, nervous, just would like cry. I went to public school in 8th grade. We had to do speeches in English class and stand up and give a speech. And I stood up and I started crying in front of my 8th grade peers because I was so scared. My teacher was so gracious. She said, "Hey, that's all right." And she let me do the speech just to her. So
that's
not
sweet.
No kidding. I thought really gracious to me in that regard. So I had this in my heart, but this phenomenal fear. I wanted to face my fears. So this camp that had been a part of my spiritual journey asked me to be a counselor, and I was in high school, and so I went to be the counselor. And part of being the counselor was got to share your testimony in front of these kids, and I was scared all week to do it. I'll be fine, and it wasn't. I stood up, gave my testimony, and I wasn't 20 seconds in, and my voice started shaking, as you know, and then the tears started coming down, and then pretty soon I'm just crying like a baby in front of all these 10-year-old boys. And 10-year-old boys are not known for compassion or sympathy or kindness.
Right.
They called me crybaby the rest of the week.
No.
And I was supposed to be, the counselor. They
counselor.
called me crybaby. I was terribly embarrassed.
That leaves an impression on you. Or it can when you experience something like that.
Trust me. It was an unpleasant experience. And so I still had, I can't even explain it, honestly. I still had, even though that horrible experience, this intense desire to help other people understand the Christian life in the way that I had not understood it. And so I said yes when they asked me to do it again. And I did again, and I cried again. And they asked me to do it again. I did it again. I cried when I did it again. It was not getting better in the sense of not crying, not being scared out of my mind, but believing that there was something more important than being controlled by my fears. So kind of emotional for me to think about it now. But a turning point after the third summer, the director of the camp, we drove, he took me out to dinner the Friday night after camp. I had done it 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks that summer. So 4 times that summer I did my testimony and again was trying to communicate the truth of the indwelling life of Christ. But always afraid and always tearing up and always getting the shaky voice. But he, over dinner, said, "Doug, I know you're scared to do this, but I think God's giving you a gift."
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know why. Because I'm not scared right now.
But how impactful to receive
Right.
those words after such a difficult, hard, emotionally raw period of time.
And speaking to what was in my heart, but I would have sounded like an idiot to say that I wouldn't have said to anybody that was in my heart because what happened when I tried to talk. Who's going to admit I'd like to be able to communicate, but I cry like a baby every time I do. So I was super encouraged that in spite of all of my tears and fears and nerves, that a guy I respected thought he saw the hand of God on my life for what was in my heart. Because again, I didn't tell him, he wasn't affirming something I had shared. He spoke something into my life that was already in my heart. So I went still not thinking ministry, planning to go to Penn State for electrical engineering, but ended up going to a 1-year concentrated Bible school first. And while there, long story, sorry, while there, January of 1983, having a quiet time up in the loft at Ravencrest Chalet and seeking the Lord, because I had this growing tension in my heart that maybe the Lord really wanted me to do ministry, and it was my fears that were keeping me from saying yes. And so I'd been praying about it. A guy named Sonny Westbrook had encouraged me personally, when you read the Bible, just don't read the Bible and then close it and say your prayers, but read your Bible and then invite the Lord in some quiet moments to, Lord, is there anything you're wanting to say to me specifically from the scriptures? And that morning in January of 1983, I know this can be abused, but nevertheless, it did sense that the Spirit of God said, in all but an audible voice. In other words, it was exceedingly clear. Doug, go to Columbia and become a Bible teacher. And I'd been to the campus of Columbia Bible College. It's now called CIU, but Columbia Bible College as a senior. Not because I was interested in going there. My girlfriend was interested in going there. So again,
by default, you went there.
Yes, kind of a pattern there. So I went, and so I was familiar with that, and I believed it to the degree of the clarity of it that payphones back then went down, and there was a payphone in the chalet at Ravencrest. And I called Penn State and said, I'm not coming. There was another place, Bell and Howell Institute for Computer Science. Can you imagine me, computer science?
That would be entertaining.
Yes. And said, I'd applied and been accepted there as well, and said, no, I'm not coming. And changed my path, said, I'm going to Columbia. Called my dad. That was a tough one. Called my dad and said, I know your hope had been that I'd be an electrical engineer or pursue something, because he had vision. It was early 80s and he saw computers were the future. And so he had encouraged me down that path, but I told him I felt the Lord was calling me to do that. And to his credit, though it was not his desire for me or hope for me, he affirmed that I should do what thought the Lord wanted me to do. So I went to Columbia to learn how to teach the Bible and do the thing I was scared out of my mind to do.
The thing you're most scared to do.
Yep. So that was the call. I think sometimes people, oh man, I wish the Lord would speak to me. The Lord spoke to me not because of the greatness of my faith, but the smallness of my faith. I was just so scared and just so far out of my comfort zone. I don't think I could have ever done or pursued what I ended up pursuing had I not had that sense that, no, this was the Lord's call on my life. Like, if you don't do it, there might be a whale coming after you.
Let's not be Jonah 2.0.
Yes. So that's the call.
That's a powerful
it's a long story. Sorry.
No, it's a great story. So you go through this journey. Now you're at Columbia.
Yeah.
How do you go from Columbia to Jacksonville, Florida?
Yeah, good question. I was in the Bible teaching program. I did my student teaching at a private school in Asheville, North Carolina called Ben Lippen. They were a boarding school.
Okay. And
so I lived in the dorm with a bunch of 11th graders my senior year and taught 11th grade Bible. And so I was planning that I might go back to Ben Lippen and teach Bible in a boarding school, but I didn't really know that I want to do that. Jackie and I were engaged, and it was like, do you really want to live in a dorm with a bunch of boys your first couple years of marriage? That wasn't, I said that as a question. Jackie was certain she did not want to. So there was a high school in Kansas, Hutchinson, Kansas, that had a position that I applied for and was accepted to. And then a principal from a Christian school in Jacksonville called Grace Christian Academy here in Jacksonville came through Columbia, and they had a middle school, junior high Bible teaching position that they were interviewing for. And I didn't really want to teach middle school, but it was Jacksonville versus Kansas, Florida versus Kansas. Mm-hmm. And the director of the Bible teaching program then, Mary Faith Phillips, said to me, Doug, I know you want to teach high schoolers, but if you will learn to teach junior high students, you will be able to teach anybody the rest of your life.
Good wisdom.
Well, yeah, she said, if you'll go learn to teach them and you can effectively teach middle school students, then you can teach anybody. And so she really encouraged me to come here to Jacksonville. We just practically thought, all right, Jackie's family's in South Carolina, my family's in Pennsylvania. If we move to Kansas, will we ever see anybody ever again? Who's like going to come?
Will they remember us?
Let's go see them in Kansas. Not. So the day we graduated from Bible college, we got in a car and drove to Jacksonville and met the church, signed a contract. Part of the great gift of that was Jackie had done general ministries with some elementary ed minor, and so she was able to get a job teaching in the elementary school at the same school.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's what brought us. So we came, signed contract. We weren't married yet. I went home, worked for the summer. We got married the end of July. Honeymoon for a week, and the day after the honeymoon was over, we packed everything in my grandfather's van and a U-Haul, and we drove to Jacksonville and moved into an apartment. Didn't know a soul. It was quite an experience. A year later, we visited Christian Family Chapel for the first time. We heard about this little church in Mandarin that was very committed to Bible teaching. So that was how we got our first exposure to CFC.
How you came to Jacksonville.
Yeah. Came in to Jacksonville, like I said, in August of '86 and visited CFC just as school teachers in town for the first time in the spring of 1987.
And then school teacher turned youth pastor.
Right. I was a school teacher for 3 years, taught 100 to 120 junior hires every day, 6 Bible classes a day.
Wow.
What fantastic training. I would have never known what the Lord was doing. I had no curriculum, just had my Bible. There were mornings I'd get up.
No curriculum,
just my Bible. I started in Genesis. And
that's so cool.
There were mornings I'd get up and go, all right, I got 6 classes today. What's the next chapter
I'm in
say?
Leviticus.
And I learned a lot about quick planning but teaching students. And so I was the soccer coach there. And then my third year, we'd been started attending here at the chapel. The youth pastor at the time, a guy named Tony Wood, asked me to speak for the high school ski retreat in February of '89. And so I went on that senior high retreat and came back. About a month later, the elders called me and said, Tony's leaving, we'd like for you to be our youth pastor. And I was like, youth pastor? I'm a Bible teacher. I don't want to be a youth pastor. So I said no. Because I really did, go to Columbia, be a Bible teacher.
Right.
I had this clear sense of
clear.
This is what I'm supposed to be, a Bible teacher. And so I said to them, no. They asked me a second time, and I said to them, no, I want to be a Bible teacher. And I still remember Frost Weaver, one of our elders now, saying, that's what we want in our youth pastor. We want our youth pastor to be a Bible teacher. And ultimately, I won't probably don't have enough minutes for another long story, but in a very clear way through Jackie, the Lord confirmed that it was indeed his intention for us to come to CFC and be the youth pastor. So he said yes, and I started as the youth pastor in June of 1989. So yeah, just finished up 35 years of being on staff here.
That's so awesome.
Yep, pretty cool. Would have never, ever, ever, ever imagined working in a church, and most certainly would have never, ever been a pastor.
Yeah, and then there you go. And then youth pastor?
Yeah, youth pastor for 6 years, associate pastor for a couple of years, co-pastor then for a few more years with Tim Lusk at the time. And then in 2005, he stepped off of staff to do full-time pastoral training in Russia, and then became the sole teaching pastor in the end of 2005.
What a journey going to, the story you shared about being at camp. And then now working at a church for 35 years in a teaching capacity. Mm-hmm. What an incredible work of the Lord.
And still crying on stage 35 years later. Some things you should just get over.
Well, I know you said so many times that there's a gratitude for dependence in that difficulty. And then another part of your story that's so interesting, I knew the overall story, but so many details in there I haven't heard before. But to hear those influential people along the way that affirmed very specifically where the Lord was having you go. It's just so cool to hear how the Lord worked so clearly in every step of that journey. As a senior at Columbia, we had to do back then senior chapel messages. They broke up the student body into like groups of 50 to 100. And they'd put you in a classroom and you had to give a chapel message to college students. And they'd give you a staff advisor. There was a guy in the seminary, a guy named Dr. Brian Kingsmore. He was my advisor for my chapel message. I gave it, and in the debrief, he said, young man, you will be a teaching pastor in a large church someday. And I was like, you're out of your mind. You laughed it off. I was like, there's not a chance in the world. I don't want to work in the church. I definitely don't want to work with adults. And pastors are people who have to lead singing and do funerals. And I have zero interest in either of those. That was in my mind, lead singing, do funerals. No, thank you. So never would have I imagined. But again, he said, you don't understand being a pastor. There's going to be a church someday where you'll be the teaching leader there. It was fairly prophetic. Have you ever reached out to him? I've tried to, but there's a number of Brian Kingsmores, and so I'm not sure I'd have the right guy. The right one. Just send it to them all. But that's the power of a few words. Again, I didn't do that, and that honestly, when the camp director spoke to me, it was something in my heart. Right. There was nothing in my heart that wanted to be a pastor of a church, but he was right. So I've often looked back and said, thanks, Lord, for that in advance. Yeah, that's incredible. So I do believe I'm doing what the Lord made me to do, not what I'm comfortable with doing, but with what the Lord's made me to do. I would agree. Thanks. I'm grateful he put you where you are. Very, very grateful. After 35 years, if I'm not, somebody ought to tell me. Yeah. What's that review process like? What's going on around here? So, such a great story. So I'm going to make a hard left turn here real quick. So we believe in right turns, not left turns. Oh, that's true. We're not in the UK here, so we're going to make a right turn. Lots of years of youth ministry. So you've had plenty of experience with games and playing games. Okay. So we are going to finish with games. So you get to pick the game. I'll give you two games. You get to choose the one you want to play. Do I really? Yeah, I'll give you a choice. I mean, I can choose for you, but... I feel like you're going to anyway. I might. But first game is called Small, Medium, Large. I'll ask you, you pick small, medium, or large, and I'll give you a small question, simple to answer, large question being more difficult. Sure. The second game is called Yikes. All right, well, I've grown up with the jokes about me being small, so we'll play Yikes. So I'm hoping something from Maybe your youth history will come up here, but what's your most embarrassing moment in ministry?
Most embarrassing?
Most embarrassing moment in ministry.
35 years, there's a lot. How much time do I have?
Maybe I should have asked, what would Jackie say is your most embarrassing moment?
Well, she's been there for she was there when I was early in adult ministry, Wednesday night Bible study called Heartbeat, and 80, 100 people in the room and teaching through the book of Acts. And I want to say that we are asking the Lord to, I want to say this carefully, to set our hearts on fire. And I was zealous and pleading that the Lord would set our hearts on fire. But what I said was that I was pleading the Lord would set our farts on higher. And, there's those moments where you say something, but you don't know you say it. But I knew I said it. And they knew I said it. I knew I said it. And there's this awkward, are we going to ignore what was just said? And there was 3 seconds of polite ignoring, and then somebody did what you just did and burst, and then everybody burst out laughing, and Bible study was done for the night.
Yes,
because there's no recovering from pleading with the Lord to set your farts on higher. Because I don't know if that's the will of the Lord or not, but I don't think that's the will of the Lord.
Goodness, he knows what your heart was.
That was a little bit embarrassing.
Oh, thanks for providing the laughs.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, I'm crying here laughing.
That's enough of foolishness. But there's been lots more.
For next time.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being willing to sit down.
Yikes!
That might be the best soundbite.
Yeah, yikes!
Yikes!
All right.
Yeah, thanks for playing yikes.
Yeah, yikes.
Most people don't choose that game. So don't tell anybody what the question was.
I won't.
Oh, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story, Doug, and walking through and sharing how the Lord has led you on this journey.
Yep.
Which just recently celebrated 35 years here. So that's
I did.
Really, really awesome.
Fantastic privilege, yes, to see. And so Justin Brown, I've had the privilege. I was his Bible teacher in 6th grade, his soccer coach, 7th and 8th grade, youth pastor here at the chapel, did his wedding in Colorado. You were at it as an 11-year-old, so I remember?
Something like that.
Yeah. You were, did his wedding, have dedicated his children, commended him to go to the mission field, and now they're back in the States, and that's been a huge privilege to be a part of seeing the generational work of God.
Well, and that was the Lord using the desire He put in your heart for other youth to be excited about the Lord's work.
Yeah, because he
full
ended
circle.
up meeting his wife at Ravencrest.
Yes, he did.
Where the Lord so powerfully worked in my life. So, yeah, really grateful for that.
Really cool story. Really cool story. Well, thanks for joining us today on the podcast to meet Doug and get to know his story of his journey here to Christian Family Chapel.